Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Nick Aldis, the National Treasure, and I'm in the ring where it matters.
In the ring where it matters.
We're joined right now by the dealer, the National Treasure, the former and soon-to-be World Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. Nick, it's an honor and a privilege to have you with us right here in the ring.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, an early happy birthday to you. I believe yours is on the next Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, coming up on the 6th. I try not to think about it too much these days.
All right. Doing my homework on you, and I'm a big fan of yours already, followed your career ever since your TNA days, I discovered that we share a common favorite wrestler, that being Bret the Hitman Hart. Was he the one who inspired you to become a professional wrestler?
More than anybody else, yeah. In the 90s, WWF was so popular in Britain that I knew who all of the wrestlers were, and I liked all of them. I was just one of those fans who just loved every bit of it. I didn't really sort of think, oh, I don't like him, I'd like him. I was just so awestruck by the whole spectacle of it. But as time went on, Bret just seemed like the coolest one. When you're a kid, you really pay attention to what you think is cool, and Bret, more than any other wrestlers at that time, a lot of the wrestlers back then, especially, and maybe I think this is one of the reasons why Bret resonated so much with people all over the world rather than just in America, was that he was a little more calm and reserved and subtle, and a lot of his detractors often use that against him and say, oh, he didn't have a big enough personality, or and that kind of thing. But that's a very American expectation. And I think what Bret represented was this sort of, he was a star for everybody all over the world. Hulk Hogan was a giant star, but Hulk Hogan was very much American first. He was waving an American flag around, and everything was always about America. And so if you were a fan anywhere else in the world, you always sort of felt like you were kind of second best. You felt like you were sort of being,
yes.
Whereas Bret, he felt like the man for everyone. And he just seemed so cool. He had the leather jacket and the long hair and the sunglasses. And, he presented himself more like a professional athlete and not like a sort of cartoon character, not the sort of, he didn't come across as this guy who was like, hey, everyone look at me all the time. And I've never really been that type of person. And I've never really enjoyed being around people who are, attention seeking all the time. Like, hey, everyone look at me. You have to have the attention on them 24/7. Bret seemed like the sort of guy who was sort of effortlessly cool. And, as time went on, it just struck me as like, that's who I'm sort of emulating. But it wasn't just Bret. I think, that I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Rock and Steve Austin and Triple H, and Sting, and they were all guys who, I think really for me, the Rock and Triple H feud in 2000 was the one that really made me sort of go, I think I want to be this. I think I want to do this. I don't just want to enjoy it. And then once I sort of made the decision, like I want to be a wrestler, the more I got into wrestling, the more I learned, and the more I started progressing and working, the more I just found myself just studying Bret and emulating Bret, as well as others. I tried to sort of think of when I look at my body of work, I think that you see some Bret, you see some Nick Bockwinkel, you see some Harley Race, you see some Flair, you see some Rock. You steal from everyone, but as far as I guess the sort of the storytelling part of what I try to do, it very much comes from Bret. Yeah,
that's very interesting. And you mentioned Sting, which I actually had a question about. You had the distinguished honor of having Sting's last match in Impact Wrestling, where he actually, where you actually beat him on the way out. What was that like? I mean, one of your heroes, and you get to actually be his last match in the promotion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge honor to be in the ring with Sting at any time. His last match, was, to me, was not, it was not a good piece of business. I didn't really like the way it went down, but I always think of the match we had at Bound for Glory more as the sort of the match that meant a lot to me, because that's where it was one-on-one, and it was a clean finish, and that was, you know, that was very much because of Sting, and that was, you know, he wanted to do that for me. So I've always really appreciated that. Stinger's he's one of the most genuine and good-natured human beings in the wrestling business, and it's he's had a huge amount of success and made a boatload of money, and it's inspiring to get to, you know, if you just to be on somebody like that's radar, for somebody like that to go, I like this kid, I want to do something for him. That was a lot for me. It's same thing with Brett, you know, I just wrestled in Calgary a couple of days ago, and Brett, you know, he's sort of booking that promotion up there, and he's like, you know, and now I'm the Stu Hart Heritage Champion, you know, and that's, you know, it's an independent belt, and it's a sort of regional belt for Calgary, but for what it represents, you know, for me, it represents the fact that Bret Hart decided that I was the right guy to hold it. So that's, again, just a very, very empowering feeling for me.
Very impressive. Very impressive. You had an illustrious career with TNA, being the first British World Heavyweight Champion to hold a title on U.S. soil. You went on once again to do that with the NWA. So my question here is twofold. One, what was it like being the first British World Heavyweight Champion? And two, what is the difference between the two championships to you?
They're very different times. I think it meant a lot to answer your first question. I wasn't sure how much it would mean to anyone else until I went back to England, and we had it was around Christmas time that I won the title, and we had like a fan party in London, and it was just very much off the cuff. It was just sort of Jeremy Borash decided to do, he would do a lot of stuff in the UK. He was doing a lot of fan interactive events because he really wanted to service the UK fans as best he could, because it was the strongest market at the time. And he decided to throw this impromptu fan party, and I went along, and I really wasn't sure what to expect, and it was sold out, completely packed, and the reception I got was, you know, it meant a lot, you know, and the media too picked up on it a lot, which again I wasn't sure would happen, but I think it, for me, it was cool to be sort of the person who sort of broke the glass ceiling. You know, I think a lot of British wrestlers, a lot of us had this sort of notion that, well, we'll be on the card, but I don't know if they'll ever put us in the main event. They'll never have us be world champion. And then for me to get to do it, it's always cool to be the first, you know. And since then, you know, Drew's gone on to have huge success. Obviously, Drew had huge success before I was, you know, before I won the TNA title anyway. But, you know, I think it's just always cool to be to be the first person to get to do something that many people thought may never happen. So, you know, anytime you get a chance to have any of those sort of things on your record, it means a lot. And then with the NWA title, obviously it's really about the history. It's about the, you know, the people who have held it before you, and to get to hold the same belt that, you know, Harley and Rick and Dory and Ricky Steamboat and Terry Funk and, you know, Dusty Rhodes. That's you know, that pretty much, that's the beginning and end of it for me. And more importantly, the fact that some of those names mentioned, like Rick and Dory and Harley before he passed away, acknowledged me as you know, as an NWA champion, and as, you know, as someone who they, you know, felt fit the criteria to you know, carry the belt that had meant so much to them and meant so much to the wrestling business,
and so much to us fans as well. To the new NWA, your role, especially in the very beginning, was very similar to Ric Flair's back in the Jim Crockett promotion days. You looked the part, you talked the part, and when you stepped into the ring, you delivered the goods. My question here would be, if you were Flair to this new era, who would be your Harley Race?
Well, first of all, I'm not Flair to this era, but you know, that's a very lofty comparison. But I guess it would be Trevor Murdoch or Tim Storm. You know, I sort of, I really hold the rivalry with Tim Storm in a special place in my heart, because we really just we really built that from scratch. We really took something that really had no business getting any attention whatsoever, and we managed to make it something. And that's a testament to the work that Tim and I did and David Lagana did to create that feeling of importance, and that you know, that sort of spectacle, and that occasion. You know, to me, the world champion in the world championship should feel like an occasion. You know, when by the time you get to the title bout, it should feel like something important is going down. It shouldn't just be another match. It has to have more than that. And to the rivalry that Tim and I had, I think, because it's like we're so different, but people looked at both of us as this sort of underdog kind of, it was an underdog story in terms of the whole thing. Like, why should anybody care about, you know, this guy wrestling this guy? And somehow we managed to make that happen. And then off the back of it, this whole promotion was sort of built. And so then when we wrestled again, you know, by the time we wrestled again, it had that sort of, there was a group of fans who had sort of followed it from the beginning, who now it really meant a lot to them. And it's probably my biggest disappointment with the NWA that we never finished that off. We never tied a bow on that. We never.
You didn't have the rubber match.
Never had the rubber match, and you know, to me, it seems like such a common sense, simple thing to do, and for some reason, it just, you know, Billy never wanted to do it. So it's like, but again, you know, it's his company. It's up to him what he does with it. But for me, it was a great disservice to the fans, I think, not to give them that.
And speaking of rubber matches and big match feelings, you had that run with Cody, which was very impressive. I remember the match at All In, which really felt like a World Heavyweight Championship match. And then the second match at NWA 70, if I recall, and they were both spectacles. But we were all, me personally, we were all burning for a third. Do you think it could ever happen?
Yeah. So I didn't catch the last part of that question.
The last part was, do you think it could ever happen, the third match between you guys?
Maybe.
Right, so we'll see.
Circumstances would have to be, you know, would have to change quite drastically for me. But hey, look, anybody who saw Cody and I's matches and our rivalry, you know, not just the matches, but all the interviews we did and all the interactions we had in Ring of Honor leading up to those matches, you can't fake that chemistry between two guys. And I think that anyone who loves the business and who loves creating like a money match and really, you know, doing that traditional build to an important match and paying it off in the right way, I think anyone who sees that would know that Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes, there's a hell of a lot more there, you know, that could be exploited for financial gain.
Yes,
So who knows? Who knows?
We'll see. That leads me to another question. I read somewhere where you wanted once to have a match with Triple H at a Starrcade of all events. And they own they own the trademark to Starrcade.
Yeah.
How with his role shifting in that organization, do you think that could ever happen? And if so,
well, he's pretty much said that his in-ring days are over. So unfortunately, I doubt it. You know, because of his health issue that he had. Thankfully, he's recovered from that. But you know, I'm sure it was something that I threw out as a sort of perfect world scenario. If I could, you know, because I get asked these sort of questions. If you could wrestle anyone in any situation, what would it be? And at that time, I think it was I think WWE had brought back the Starrcade brand. You know, they'd been doing some live events with Starrcade, and you know, it was just one of those things where, hey, never say never. And I thought, you know, that would be if it was up to me and I was given the chance to do anything, you know, that might have been the one that I'd pick, because like I said, along with Brett, you know, Hunter was probably the guy that I studied the most, because I'm a villain, you know, I'm a heel, like deep down, like my role is the great antagonist. Like that's what I love to do. I like being a ring general. I like sort of controlling the pace, and I like providing the obstacle for the hero to overcome. Like that's the skill set that I've sort of devoted my 10,000 hours to. That's the role that I've dedicated myself to trying to master. And obviously no one ever masters it. You know, there are people who have mastered it, Ric Flair and Brett and Hunter and you know, Bob Winkle, Buddy Rogers. But you know, that's what I'm always striving to, is to be the great antagonist. Yeah, the sort of, because I'm British for one thing, so I understand that in you know, the natural sort of inclination for most fans is to want to sort of, is for the British guy to be the heel, to be the villain, to be the guy to overcome. So I always embraced that, and I always enjoyed it, and it's always what I've found is the most natural and comfortable for me. So I think, you know, again, just in a sort of hypothetical kind of perfect world, just, you know, if you could do anything, what would it be type of situation? I'm sure in my mind I thought, you know, if you could line up all those pieces right and do that, it would have been a really fun story for the NWA title, right? Like, because the one belt that Triple H never had. Yeah, the one belt that Triple H never held. You know, he held the big gold, and he obviously held the WWF title many times. But if there was some way, you know, if all the stars were aligned and you could have made anything happen at one point or other, if he could have been the challenger for the NWA title and, you know, and had a chance to beat me at Starrcade, sort of, you know, they were, you know, just like I said, it wasn't anything that I was taking seriously, but it was one of those kind of what if situations.
And it would have been an amazing match, nevertheless. Which leads me to the obvious question, which I'm sure a lot of people have asked you verbatim, but again, I have to, because I would be doing a disservice to my audience if I didn't. Someone with your looks, physical, and verbal abilities, I mean, you would be the natural fit for what WWE would be looking for in their superstars. Why didn't it happen yet?
I'm afraid I can't answer that. If I knew the answer to that, then I would be, you know, I guess I would be doing my best to rectify it. But I try not to spend too much time dwelling on that. Ultimately, it's, you know, it hasn't happened, but that's not to say that it won't. I would love the opportunity, and without getting too far into it, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, I feel like I've done enough to at least earn an opportunity. No one deserves any more than that. No one deserves anything in this business, but I do feel like I meet the criteria. You know, let's just leave it there.
Okay. During your time with TNA, you've been a member of several factions. You were part of the British Invasion. You spent a stint with the new Main Event Mafia. You were even a part of Dixieland for a while. And then you went on to form your own faction in the NWA, Strictly Business, which, to me at least, it was very reminiscent of the Four Horsemen. Which of these teams was your favorite to work with? And if you ever had your pick of another Four Horsemen-like faction, who would your perfect faction be, with you, of course, as the leader of it?
Right. Well, I did love Strictly Business, and again, I felt like that was something that just got sort of cut short way too early. It was, and it just and with no real reason given. But I felt like we had great chemistry, and it was doing a lot for everybody involved, not just for me. But I did enjoy it because I think, you know, stables, when they're done right, can be great. When they're done wrong, they can be horrible, because if you just take random people and throw them together in a group of people, give them a name, and there's no obvious chemistry between them, there's no obvious sort of links. With us, with Strictly Business, Tom and I are great friends. We have been friends for half of our lives now. We basically broke into the business at the same time. We grew up in the business together. And I've been his friend through thick and thin, and he's had some dark points in his life. He had some substance issues that he's come out the other side of. And he's really turned himself around, and in my opinion is the most overlooked talent in the entire industry. And then Camille, obviously there's a massive link there, because I was instrumental in essentially introducing her to the wrestling world. And she embraced that role as my enforcer, did such a great job with it. We had great chemistry. She learned very quick. She has fantastic instincts, and and obviously her physical talent and her physical attributes are there to see for everyone, right? She's when it comes to sort of athletics, when it comes to sort of, especially for a female, she's in very, very, very rare air. There's very few women who sort of have the attributes and credentials that she has. And then Tom and Camille are now married, so we used that like it just made sense. It all fit together. And then with Chris Masters, or Chris Adonis as he's known in NWA, he's a great buddy of mine, and I've known him for years. And he's another guy who is doing the best work of his career, and is, in my opinion, being thoroughly overlooked. He's doing some great work. And this guy, he and I often gravitated to each other, I think, because we both understood that perhaps we were both a little bit of a victim of our own success early on, because we both got opportunities on television very, very young when we weren't really ready. And that can follow you around, because people in decision-making positions, the wrestling business moves so fast that they have this sort of this inner box kind of idea of who you are, and they go, he's all right, he's he's a bit clunky, a bit green, whatever, and that can live with you forever, because they don't have the time to look at you, going off and honing your craft and becoming a much more finished and polished version of yourself. That's the drawback of getting picked up early. He was signed, I think, at 21 or 22, like I was, and we just weren't ready for the spot. So then you sort of, you battle that for a long time. But he's out here putting in some of the best work of his career. And again, it was, and he fit right in with the group, because he knew his role in the group. He knew how to be part of the team, but also to, be his own person, and to, being in a group can sometimes be a hindrance to certain guys if they want to stand out. But that's why it's so important to pick the members carefully, because to me, a great faction like the Four Horsemen, or like DX, or even the Shield, when the Shield, I think that they get overlooked a lot of the time as an all-time great faction or stable, because the individuals all still have to shine by themselves, but then collectively they have a whole different level of appeal as a unit. And that's what I always tried to accomplish with Strictly Business. So that one means the most to me, just on a personal level, because I sort of was the architect of it. Yeah. But the other one obviously is the Main Event Mafia, just because it was such a feather in the cap for me to be considered to be put in that group with all-time greats, right? Kurt Angle, Sting, and Samoa Joe. And when it was pitched to me, and I don't say pitched, it wasn't like I had a choice, but you know, when it was kind of laid out to me, my initial reaction was, I'm not the right person for this. Like, the fans aren't going to buy me, as I'm not the same level as these guys. And the response I got was, that's the whole point. Like, Sting wants it to be the past, present, and future. And again, you know, could not ask for a better endorsement or a better compliment than that.
Yeah. Getting down to business now with your next match at NWA Hard Times III on November 12th in New Orleans. It will be against Aldis, who ambushed you after your match with Flip Gordon at NWA 74. Again, I have a twofold question. Why do you think he ambushed you? And secondly, are you going to give him hard times at the event?
Well, I talked about this in one of the interviews I had on the show lately. I think it's very obvious why, because he wants to make a name for himself. You know, it's been over a year, way over a year since I've been NWA champion, but people still, you know, people still, when they think of the NWA, they think of me. And when, you know, Odinson could have attacked anybody, but he wanted to make the biggest name for himself he could. So he came after me. So it's smart on his part to do that. He'll learn at Hard Times. He's in it now. It's like, I told him, you're in this now, right? Like, there's no turning back. So it's going to be a sink or swim type of situation for him. So I'm looking forward to it, because I'm looking forward to seeing whether Odinson can step up. Like, that's really what this whole thing is about. Like, can you hang, you know, or are you just hype? You know, are you just a guy who ends up being good on paper? You know, I've seen a lot of guys come and go like that. I was one of them, you know, where I was always labeled as, he's got loads of potential. Tons of potential. I used to dread the word potential in TNA, because every time that I would get, you know, somebody else would get picked ahead of me to get a push, it was always because, oh, you got so much potential. You're so young. You got so much potential. Until eventually I went, you know, potential, like, give me the opportunity. And when I did get it, I took it. Yeah. And that's sort of where he's at now. He's going like, I'm sick and tired of being labeled as a guy who's gonna be good, as a guy who could be money, as a guy who has potential to be a star. Like, I want to get going and do it. So I went, all right, cool. Let's see what you got.
I wouldn't look past him. He's an impressive opponent, but
I'm absolutely not looking past him.
But when you do beat him, would the 10 pounds of gold be in your possession again? Are you looking towards regaining your title?
I've moved on. I'm not interested, really. I think that there's you know, there's too much politics around the title, and I'm just I'm more concerned with just representing the business in the best way I can. And the title now is, you know, I feel like it's lost a lot of its significance because of the way it's been treated. And I don't, the way that I was betrayed and you know, the way that I was treated the last time I was supposed to get a title shot, I'm not really interested in getting involved with that again.
I understand. I've read a lot about it and I understand. All right, moving on to a lighter topic. The FIFA World Cup in Qatar is just around the corner. The United States and in England will meet in the group stage. So in the Aldis household, who will you be cheering for? Being that you're English, your significant other is an American, your child is an American born. So
yeah. Well, look, I'll be cheering for England. I mean, there's no two ways about it. and my wife knows better than to get too to get too involved. I really want to see U.S. soccer continue to thrive and grow. I live in Nashville, and I'm probably going to get season tickets next year to NSC's, you know, because they've got a new stadium now, and I've been to a lot of the games when they played at the Nissan Stadium. And you know, I love football. I'm a British kid who grew up in the 90s. Of course, I love football. But when it's the World Cup, it's, you know, it's Three Lions, man. And hey, if whatever happens, I would say that if the US were to make it further in the competition than England, then I would cheer on the US next, because yes, I am essentially an adopted American at this point. I'm not an American citizen, not yet anyway. I'm sure that's coming. But and yeah, look, my son's American, my wife's American, you know, my life is American. So I take just as much pride in my American roots as I do my British ones. But when it comes to football, no, it's Three Lions.
Do you mind if I ask what's your favorite club in the Premier League?
Man United. I'm a Man United fan. Yeah,
that's a good team. That's a really good team. Many wrestlers, Nick, have made names for themselves in the acting business. They've made careers and success. Have you ever considered doing that?
Well, I've done some acting. I've had, you know, small little acting gigs here and there, and I really enjoyed. I did Panto, which is just a traditional sort of English play. They do every Christmas. They'll do. It's essentially like a musical adaptation of a kid's fairy tale. So, for example, I've been, I was the huntsman in Snow White once, and I was the genie in Aladdin. And it's very tongue-in-cheek, very sort of comedic, slapstick kind of, but it's still a big, you know, theater production. And I loved doing that. I had a great time doing that, and I would love to do it again. And I recently did a couple of little sort of non-speaking things on heels, you know, which was fun and easy. And you know, it's long days. I will say that it's hard. I don't know how much. You know, acting is first of all, I'm not trained. I'm not a trained actor, so I would never, you know, disrespect actors or the acting world by sort of suggesting, oh yeah, I would love to do that, you know, without training. But you know, I get asked that a lot, and I think it obviously means that people think that I would lend myself well to acting roles, but I really don't like auditioning. I went to a lot of auditions when we was in Virginia. I went to a lot of auditions for House of Cards and for Turn, Washington Spies and stuff like that. And I feel like I would always get through to the callback and then never get. And I think I'm not very good at auditioning. I'm one of those people, like, and look, again, it's my wrestling training. I'm very much one of those people that I can turn it on when there's an audience, when the cameras are rolling. But I find it difficult to manufacture it in a empty room with a couple of people and a notebook. Like that's not as easy for me. But if there are opportunities, you know, I'll always explore them. But acting is not something that I, you know, pursue with any sort of great sincerity.
In addition to myself being a big wrestling fan, I'm also a big James Bond fan. And many times when I see you on the screen in your suit, decked out with your suave, I always think to myself, that guy could play Bond. Now that Daniel Craig has stepped down and Eon haven't announced the successor, would you be willing to throw your hat in there? Maybe you could get the part. I think you'd make a great Bond.
I would absolutely throw my hat in there if I knew where to throw the hat. You know,
Yes,
I will
Barb.
say this: it was very I was very it was very nice to see so many fans on Twitter, especially, mention it and bring it up. Like, I really was not expecting that, and it came, and then I sort of had a bit of fun with it and kind of said, "Hey, I'm available," you know. And I was really genuinely taken aback by how many fans actually went, "You'd be great. I would love to see that." I'm sure whoever they pick's going to be a great choice, but it's going to be and I do agree. I think that if there was ever a role that I could do, I suppose that a serious role, as far as, you know, leading man, that would probably be, I can see why people would see that one would work, especially with the way that Bond has been, with the way the Bond character has evolved in modern times. Like, what Daniel Craig did with it was just, you know, phenomenal. Like, those movies took it back to a much truer version of Bond, much more close to the books. You know, I think that the Bond that Daniel Craig portrayed was, I think, much more of the version that Albert Broccoli had in mind when he wrote the character. It was much more nuanced, much more flawed. I think that, and look, I love Pierce Brosnan. I think he's a fantastic actor. One of the, you know, and when you talk about smooth and suave, I mean, a really fantastic Bond. But I think towards the end of Pierce Brosnan's run, the way that those movies were written, Bond was perhaps a little bit too perfect. You know, he was like, you know, you just never felt like there was a chance he could lose. It got a little bit kind of, and that wasn't on Pierce Brosnan. He played it great, but it was the thing that I loved about the like Casino Royale is I still watch that film. It comes on TV and I'll still find myself just sitting and watching it, because Bond was flawed. You know, he had alcohol issues. You know, he womanized. Yeah, he was a womanizer because he was cold-hearted, and and it was sort of, he was, you know, borderline a sociopath. You know, but it was because he was trained. He was an orphan. He was, you know, trained to be this sort of ruthless killer, and to have no emotion, and to, you know, and then when his heart is broken, you know, by Vesper, because he's betrayed, that's the thing that finally pushes him over the edge, where he's like, I'll never let anybody in again. Now you understand why he is the way he is. He's not this comedic sort of cartoon character like, shaken not stirred. It was like, no, this is a facade, because we don't know who James Bond really is, because he's a deeply flawed character who suffered a very traumatic childhood, you know, and suddenly there's a whole new level to this, you know, to this guy. And Daniel Craig just, those are big shoes to fill for anybody.
You mentioned the books, and again, I'm a James Bond nerd, so I had to ask: have you read any of them? Are you a fan of the books as well as the movies?
Not all of them. Yeah, I have read Casino Royale, and I forget the other one I read. It'll come to me as soon as I stop thinking about it. But I have read them, and I do find that they're much grittier than, you know, than the most of the movies had ever sort of portrayed them to be. It's quite interesting. I almost wish that I had read them sooner. A bit like the Bourne movies. Like, I love the Jason Bourne films, and I wish that I had read the books first.
Yes.
Because I'd seen the movies and I loved them, but then I you know, like anything, I knew what was going to happen. I knew where it was going. But you can just see, you see from the way that the character is, you know, the way that he's written, you can, you know, you're just able to get so much more layers in print than you are in in film, no matter how good the actor is. Even if you're as great as Daniel Craig or as Matt Damon, you know.
At the end of this interview, is there anything you'd like to say to my audience? The floor is yours.
Well, if your audience is predominantly in Libya, that's, first of all, hello. You know, I was unaware that there was such a wrestling audience in Libya, and I'm fascinated by that part of the world. I would love to visit more and to see more and learn more of the history, and just for anyone who has followed my career and continues to do so, you know, I appreciate it, and you know, being a positive fan, you know, really goes a long way for us. Like, one thing I think that wrestling fans are very, very vocal online. They're very, very opinionated, and God bless them for that. But I think sometimes it's important to remember that no matter what you might think of someone, whether you're a huge fan of them or whether you think that they're overrated or you think that they're underrated or you don't like their work, whatever it is, we're all guys who have to pack our bags and spend time away from our kids, you know, to go and try to entertain people. And I think that a lot of the time, if you before you say something online, before you know, broadcast your opinion, before you kind of start lamenting about what you think this should or shouldn't happen, if you always sort of begin with that fundamental understanding of wrestlers, I think that the wrestling business would be much better off, because ultimately we're all just trying to make a living and feed our families. And a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff that you may or may not like is completely out of our control.
Words to live by. Words to live by. Nick Aldis, thank you for stepping in the ring with us today. It was an honor and a pleasure, and best of luck to you with everything that you do.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, champ.
In the ring where it matters.